All right, good evening, everybody. It is 5:32. This is a special called meeting of the Town of Spencer Board of Aldermen on January the 30th. You have the agenda that is before you that has been published and notice given for the specific items on this agenda. So we'll be covering those tonight. We have all of our board present except for Alderman Howell tonight. And so we do have a quorum. And we will begin with an invocation and pledge of allegiance. Father, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you for the nice weather. And we thank you for rain and now for the drying out. We thank you for our staff in this town and all that they do to serve the residents and businesses. And we thank you especially for the fire department who are here tonight to discuss. Help us that we may find solutions to their staffing needs, that we may be able to work together to provide sound fire service for our community, and that we can make sure that we are taking everyone's needs into consideration, and that we work with the fire department to make sure that everybody is not overworked, and that it continues to be a place where our town, where people want to come and work and feel part of the family that is the Spencer Fire Department and the Town of Spencer staff. Grant us wisdom and discernment tonight. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Mr. Blunt is outnumbered this evening, but for some reason he was able to get a request in to go first. So there's a friendly amendment being made to our agenda that's before you, moving item 5 up to item 3. We're going to talk about the municipal agreement with NCDOT first, because that discussion should go relatively quickly.
And as always, I'm here for entertainment value primarily, so it's hard to be entertaining talking about a municipal agreement. But I remembered many months ago on one of my reports, somebody asked, what is EB 5861? Because the number didn't ring any bells. And staff from time to time over the last couple of years has asked, when did this get started? And we've had a struggle figuring out exactly when EB 5861 started. So I did a little digging today and found some maps. And I'm just going to run through them very quickly, and that's why I got moved up, because mine's going to be quick and yours is going to be long. But these maps, you'll see a dotted yellow line on each one of them. I added that to the original map so you could see it a little more clearly. But back in 2004, I was chairman of the Rowan County Grants Creek Greenway Committee, and we created a plan with a consultant to build a greenway from Grants Creek, along Grants Creek, all the way from Landis into Spencer and out to the Aiken River. And that part that's in yellow, the dotted yellow line, comes down 3rd Street into downtown Spencer and turns and goes out 29 Salisbury Avenue to the Wilcox Bridge. So that sort of zigzag line, if you imprint that in your mind from 2004, this was a later map. The Carolina Thread Trail project got started in 2007. It wasn't adopted in Rowan County until 2014, but this map was created sometime before that. Again, this is the Spencer section of the Carolina Thread Trail, and my dotted line again shows 3rd Street up into downtown and out to the river, same path. A little bit later in 2012, the Spencer Woods project came along, which is now the Standback Forest. Theirs was a little bit different in the routing in that it came down 7th Street and circled up through the Standback Forest. At that time, there was only the front part, but they predicted we would have the rear part also, so good prediction. And then ran through downtown Spencer and went out to the river. And they said in that plan that had nothing to do with the Aiken River, in a part called Connections, that future connections with Grants Creek Greenway and the Aiken River, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They went on to say how important that was to that plan. In our 2016 bike ped plan, again, that same routing down Third Street, again, up to town, back out to the river, was a part of that plan. And I finally found this plan, working with our MPO. This was the original EB 5861 map that was drawn by whoever was in charge whenever it was adopted, but sometime after 2004, but not much later than that. The original pathway coming up Third Street into downtown, zigzagging a little bit and out to the river. That original plan had a total cost estimate of roughly $4.5 million. It was 80% DOT money, which was actually federal transportation money, and then 20% Spencer match. And in the small print there, it says, luckily the town couldn't find the match. So we didn't get this built back in those decades ago. And the reason that's a good thing is because in recent years, we've started thinking a little more about the nodes and the connectors. Y'all have seen this map before. And as we looked at all the places in and around Spencer, we recognized that there was a better use for that trail, sidewalks, greenways, trails. And that was to connect all these points and to connect it to points in Davidson County and points in Salisbury, and using the greenway system to connect to their greenway system. So luckily, we didn't find our match for the original $4.5 million. And I'm hung up. My slide presentation is stuck. There we go. So the town had hired Kimley Horn to flesh out the thoughts that we were having on how to connect it. Came up with this very complicated map. You still see that dotted yellow line that I added to it, taking it from the Standback Forest through the downtown, past our schools, and out to the Aiken River. So through this whole 20 years, this has been a reoccurring theme of how important it was to make these connections. All those other lines that you see on the map are other connection points that they thought were important that became a part of the overall plan. It's a little hard to see that, but this was the pricing that we came up with to do the whole thing. So from $4.5 million, we're up to $13.5 million now to do the whole project. And before you think we're crazy, I drew those little lines out there. $6.5 million of it is more representative of what the original plan was. So the cost of doing what we were trying to do 20 years ago has gone up about 50% over what it was then. The rest of it is all these other connector ideas that we've had, most of them being greenways instead of sidewalks. So tonight, to wrap it up, what we're here asking you to do is take the first step. We've been talking about it for 20 years. Now it's time to do something. The $4.5 million funding is still available through our original allocation for EB 5861. And what we would like to do is proceed with doing what is called a feasibility study, which I have defined as preliminary design and environmental documentation through Kimley Horn, doing it as our subcontractor. The pricing for that is a total price of $45,000, and it still has the 80-20 match, so Spencer's portion is a little over $9,000. What we're asking of you tonight is to approve the manager entering into the intergovernmental agreement with NCDOT so that we can get that process started. And if you have any questions on the details of the agreement, our manager will explain those to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blunt. Board, questions for Mr. Blunt or the manager related to the contract? I figured you might. Go ahead.
One of the parts of this agreement says that the person responsible charge should be a full-time employee, but it may be split up. Do we have a full-time employee that we will assign to this? That's my first question.
Yeah, I think what it's saying is the person responsible, which would be Peter, must be a full-time employee of the town.
Okay.
Not full-time dedicated to the project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The time frame they're talking about here, is that the time frame for the study? or the completion. It's talking about a 3-year window of period of performance. So is that,
The 3-year window would more likely be for the implementation of the whole project, assuming we find additional funding. The actual study would not take anywhere near that amount of time.
okay, so theoretically, then, we're talking about having this complete in 3 years? Is that what this
I
is
can,
saying?
I can jump
If we
in.
find some money, but yeah, go right ahead.
Some of the, I'll share with you some of what our consultant provided to us as we were talking through this in terms of the timeline. And so what the consultant said was if we start right-of-way acquisition the first of 25, about a year from now, that would mean we complete the feasibility study, get under contract for 75% design, and then complete that within a year, so on and so forth. But what they were suggesting was that we should probably plan on doing this, getting the right-of-way acquisition started probably midpoint next year, 2025, and then that would get pushed out, from there. But the first thing we have to get through is this feasibility study.
Right, right. It talks about, municipality shall accomplish all right-of-way activities, so we will be responsible for all the acquisition of right-of-way, is that correct? And then it talks about relocation of water, it talks about municipalities shall indemnify and hold harmless, blah, 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 from any and all damages or claims that might arise on account of said right-of-way acquisition, drainage, and construction easement for the construction of said products. Does that mean that we would be responsible for relocating water, cable, sewer, that sort of thing?
If that was required,
Okay.
yes. But the intent is, this project's a little different than like a roadway project.
Right,
And the hope would be you wouldn't actually have to relocate.
yeah. I'm thinking, on my side of the street, on Charles Street, the water lines are right there at the edge of the driveway. I mean, there's no sidewalk now or anything there, and no curbing or anything, and so I'm just wondering.
Typically, they'll let you go over with sidewalk as long as you allow connections where there are valves and things like that for sidewalk.
I
So
know,
you're not gonna necessarily have to relocate.
You know, all the cable for the schools is right through that area as well.
And that's part of the feasibility study, is figuring out where all those things are so we can decide which side of the road the sidewalk should be on. So
Okay.
that's what they're looking at.
And do we have ARPA funding that will be a part of this?
No, all of our ARPA funding is going towards staff salaries and benefits. And then in terms of the supplanted funding, this is not a project that's part of that
Okay.
plan.
And
And it talks about a funding table about right-of-way, and I haven't seen anything about a funding table. Have we seen that? What they allow us to be reimbursed for
So
right-of-way?
the original $3.5 million from NCDOT was originally established just for construction phases. And one of the things we've been able to do in the last few years is get that to be split out, so there is funding available for other phases. That's actually where some of this funding, this 45,000, the 36,000 is just a piece of the design funding that's available. Some of that $3.5 million is going to be available for right-of-way. Some of and then, so in other words, what's left for construction will wind up being less than $3.5 million, because we are splitting some of it up into the other phases. But all of it, in all cases, it'll be a 80-20 split. So whatever the cost is, these funds will go towards 80%, and we'll match it with our 20.
And much of this will be built in the existing right-of-way of the road, so there won't be as much right-of-way acquisition as you might think there is.
Okay, okay. I think that's all I flagged.
the other thing too, for the board's knowledge, just remember, we had made a request to our legislators for an appropriation for this project, which I think we can still continue to do. What we are doing now is tying that piece in with the chamber and the EDC's overall objectives for the North Rowan area connector. And the whole point is connectivity whether it be sidewalk connectivity, whether it be like the access road that we've talked about for the industrial development area, those sorts of things, along with the interchange that East Spencer and the county have been working towards. Trying to package all of that as a larger project for this area, because apparently when it comes to the state level and even above that, those larger packaged projects tend to be more attractive for funding.
I do know that the Salisbury mayor had said to me sometime back that there might be some way that they could partner with us to connect to the Salisbury Greenway,
Yeah.
so.
And this is a great project for phasing, it's sidewalks basically. So we can build 100 feet of sidewalk this month and another 200 feet next month as we find available funds. We don't have to wait till we find it all to get started on the project.
All right, thank you.
Other questions from the board? Okay. Hearing none, board, there is a request from staff to adopt the municipal agreement with NCDOT for the EB 5861 project for the feasibility study for the Northern Rolling Connector. Is there a motion to approve that?
I move.
There's a motion by Mayor Pro Tem. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mohammed. All in favor? All right, all opposed? And that is approved unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Blunt. All right, the next item, we are going to consider authorizing the fire department staff to apply for an Office of the State Fire Marshal, OSFM matching grant.
Mayor and Board, how are you this afternoon?
Good.
I appreciate your willingness to meet tonight. So the OSFM grant, it's been available every year. Due to some recent changes in a House bill, due to our staffing levels, we were deemed ineligible. You couldn't have more than 6 full-timers, and although we don't, our part-time hours added together did equate to more than 6, so it kind of ruled us ineligible. I'm not 100% sure that we're going to be successful. They may come back and say you're still ineligible. However, if we are able to apply for this and are successful in being awarded the grant, it's a 50-50 grant. So what myself and Peter have talked about is the idea is to take 20,000 of already allotted budgetary funds and be able to transform that into 40,000, which allows us to buy PPE and equipment that we need for our staff. So I'm just seeking approval for us to put in for that grant.
All right, board, any questions on this for Chief Lanning? All right, hearing none. Is there a motion to authorize the department staff to apply for this grant?
So moved.
There's a motion from Ms. Moody. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Miller. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, all opposed? And that's approved unanimously. All right, thank you, sir.
Absolutely, thank you.
The next item, and probably the most important
I'll say
item.
the easy part's out of the way.
Warm up.
All right, so we're going to hear a presentation and an update from the fire department and the manager on staffing, and then there are 2 budget ordinances that we'll have for consideration.
Yes.
Turn it over to you.
So the packet was provided before you, and so I just want to go through it. I'm not here to read to you. I don't want to read slide for slide, but there was a couple things I did want to elaborate on, make sure there was no questions, there was a full understanding of what we have, what we need, and why we need it. Clicker's not clicking. All right, so our current staffing model is obviously we have 1 full-time fire chief. We had a part-time deputy chief, 3 full-time captains that began in May of '21. We have currently 14 part-time firemen that work revolving 12 to 24-hour shifts with a max of 4 per a month, and then 4 volunteers. So our call volume, as you can see, there was a huge jump. So 2020, the year that I was brought in and became the fire chief, we were at 637, and last year we were at 1240. Right? So a 94% increase. We had a 26% increase last year. I would say a 10 to 15% increase is normal around the county. In a 4-year span to go almost 100% is unheard of. The negative to that is shy of adding full-timers. Our staffing model hasn't changed. The number of guys we have on the truck hasn't changed to kind of reflect the need that we have. So what does it take? So, and this is a brief condensed, and my goal in this is not telling you what we need in total, but what us as Spencer Fire Department, what our mutual aid companies expect and what we should expect of ourselves to provide for two various call types. So the one is a structure fire. Obviously, it's arguably one of our most severe calls, most important. As the fire chief, if I go to Salisbury, Ellis, Millers Ferry, I'm expected, if I'm there first, I am the incident commander. It's the way that the model is in Rowan County. If I'm not, there's different positions and designations for second chief, third chief, so on and so forth. So there you have your additional chief officers, interior supervisor, right? So if I get somewhere second, then I'm gonna go interior with the crews, and I'm kinda over everything that happens inside. For us, on our engine company, you have a company officer. To put it simply, they supervise the crew. Although all three of the ones that are sitting here can tell you their job is not remotely that simple. From the very moment they get there, they have about 2 to 3 seconds to decide how we're gonna fight this fire. All right, and they take all things into account, weather conditions, vehicle placement, apparatus placement, conditions of the house, so on and so forth. The engineer should, although we do not have a set engineer, their sole responsibility is to run the lifeline. And for us, interior in a structure fire, your only lifeline is your hose line. All right, and so it is very detrimental that those individuals know what they're doing. In the fire service, there's a thing called an engineer, and there's a thing called a lever puller, right? You can teach a monkey to pull levers. However, do they understand the reason and the science behind what they're doing? And then obviously you have your firemen. They're responsible for pulling the hose line, forcing doors, and accompanying the captain. Ultimately, the captain will go through with the tick, and the fireman pulls the hose, put the fire out. And although we all fight over who's going to be on the nozzle, because that's the fun part of the job, ideally, that is the fireman's job. So just with this, at a bare minimum structure fire in Spencer Fire Department is expected to put 5 people at a minimum on the scene. And this is all within 5 minutes. A cardiac arrest. So again, my job, I get there, I assess the scene, make sure it's safe for the crew to come in, and I begin documenting. We've got a clipboard with forms for it, and every time they push epi for the patient, every time we do anything and everything, it's documented for EMS when they get to the hospital. That's vital for them to give them that transfer of the patient. Again, the engine company. The captain's gonna get there, he's gonna check for a pulse. Again, he's the leader of their crew. He'll initiate chest compressions. Now, the other 2 positions we can alternate. It's not always set in stone, but somebody is gonna have to put the AED on the patient, and it can't be the one doing compressions, and it can't be the one inserting an artificial airway. So again, although for us this is a pretty routine call, we still need at least 3 people for it to be successful. Any questions thus far? So a firefighter. And I didn't want to sit here and bore you guys with a full job description, but just understanding that, again, although for all of our positions, every call type changes what the expectation is. Again, if we go to Salisbury and we're 4th engine, we may go from being fire attack to having to secure a secondary water supply. Again, those expectations change. Ultimately, perform emergency medical care, extinguish the fire, assist with pub ed, and then obviously train daily. Right, guys and girls will tell you they're expected at a minimum 2 hours of training every day, and that's just a bare basic. And the reason for that's not necessarily to say that they're bad or they need help, but it goes back to ISO and that they're required 216 hours annually of training. Engineer, again, every call type's going to change. You wouldn't think that it matters where you park an apparatus on a call, but that is one of the most important things. If you go to a structure fire and you park the engine in front of the house, when the ladder gets there, somebody's going to cuss you out and yell at you. You're in their way. It's not where you belong, before or below, or after. So again, having people who are trained and specialize in this position is crucial, because bad engine placement or apparatus placement can completely throw a curveball and take a call that was going smooth and turn it into not. Securing a water supply. Again, knowing the streets, knowing where in this town we have hydrants, right? The captain can assist them, but again, the captain has their own job. In my professional opinion, a good engineer knows where the hydrants are. If you're going down a street, hey, when I get up here to Yadkin, there's one on the right, right? And so that's crucial to know those things. Knowledge of pump operations, friction loss, gallons per minute. There's all these formulas, and and you always heard in school that you need to learn this because you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket when you get older. Well, we all do have calculators in our pockets. However, sitting on a pump panel at 3 a.m. in the morning You may know that this line flows a certain gallons per minute, but what happens when you add 3 more lines and you add 600 foot to that, right? That initial pressure is completely different. And all of those are things that in a split second, these individuals should and are gonna have to know. Obviously, apparatus maintenance, they're kind of our first line. Currently, Captain Waller does that, but a well-trained engineer can listen to a fire truck in the morning and tell you something's wrong with it. Right, when you're pumping it, it sounds a certain way, and every truck's different. But if you're assigned to a piece of apparatus, you know it like the back of your hand. Captains, all right, currently our catch-all, and we'll go into this later. Currently our captains, they don't know from 1 minute to the next, 1 hour to the next if they're driving or if they're doing their job as we hired them to do. All right, issue fire scene assignments prior to my arrival if they get there before I do. Well-informed decisions, perform a 360. It's the things are as simple as when they perform a 360, they're looking for structure conditions, construction type. Is it sitting on a basement? So if we go through the floor, we're gonna fall 10 foot or we're gonna fall 2 foot to a crawl space. Where's utilities? Or do we have a victim hanging out of a bedroom window? All of those things, and they're expected to do this within 30 seconds. And then oversee the maintenance interdepartmental. Staffing and training with that. So currently, the current model is that we have captains and we have a part-timer, all right? Some of those part-timers are well-experienced and well-trained. Some of them are engineers at career departments. Some of them are out of rookie school for 6 months. Inadvertently, what we're putting these individuals in a position to do is that 6-month rookie out of rookie school that just barely knows how to be a fireman, we're forcing them to ride the captain's seat and make life or death choices. Right? We don't want to do that, but the current staffing model, that's what that forces. So I broke down, just so there was an understanding of what is required of each position and the time that it takes to acquire that. So for a fireman, bare minimum is your firefighter certification, your EMT, and NIMS 100, 200, 7, and 800. Right? It's a little more than 1,000, but let's just say 1,000 hours minimum in-person training to complete that. For engineer, you've got EVD, your Class B license, and the 5 different chapters and parts of your driver operator program. On top of the initial 1,000 hours, now you have another 300. And for our captains, fire officer 1 and 2, instructor 1 and 2, and those go hand in hand. You cannot get your fire officer 2 if you don't have instructor 2. They go together. NIMS 300 and 400. The caveat to that is to be able to get your fire officer, or I'm sorry, your instructor, it is a minimum of 5 years certified. So, guy out of rookie school is completely, even if maybe they have the knowledge, they're ineligible to go and get these certifications, and it's training that is crucial for their position. So again, that's another 200 hours. So we're roughly 1,500 hours into a position, not including the time of service. Any questions?
What is NIMS? What's it stand for?
National Incident Management System.
Okay.
It is a federal program that teaches us accountability and how command systems work.
And the numbers, 100, 200, 700, 800, 300?
Yep, 100, 200, 7, and 8 are your entry level, 3 and 4 are your incident commanders.
Is that hours or?
No, they're
It's-
roughly 10 to 20 hours per class.
Okay.
So here is a snapshot of what our February calendar looks like. All right, in red will be our current vacancies. In yellow are our current vacancies and the days that Chief Lewis is unavailable. And the reason that I feel that that is important is that is a total of 324 hours of coverage that we currently do not have for February. Including Chief Lewis's, where he is not available, means that that's an extra 180 hours that I'm gonna have to work on top of my 40-hour work week. And somehow try to make 26 hours out of a 24-hour day. And with this is to keep in mind too, and I said it earlier, 4 shifts a month. And the reason that we mandate it and cut it at 4 shifts a month as much as we feasibly can is to ensure that our part-timers don't go over 999 hours in a year. This is what a proposed calendar should look like with full-time staffing. And you can see the colors change. It's a little hard for those 2 colors to kind of differentiate. But that is what the cycle or the schedule would look like on our current 4896 schedule that we work.
Is that 48 hours on, 96 off?
48 on, 96 off, yes ma'am.
Okay.
Any questions over the staffing? So as much as I hate to do this, I try not to, I'm gonna make this piece personal. I'm gonna make it about me. Last year, between the hours of 5 and 8, I responded to 417 calls. That's 417 calls that I think anyone could argue they should have been at home with their family. It was 417 calls that, because of our staffing level, I did not feel comfortable with our staff responding with 2 people. They just would have not been able to do their job as expected and in the way that the citizens and business owners in the town deserve. It included weekends, town deserved holidays, and alone equated to 498 hours of uncompensated time. Did that and still came in and worked my 40-hour work week. Covered 31 12-hour vacant 12-hour shifts for an additional 372 hours. 32 out of 38 working fires, I was not able to function as a chief or a chief officer. Fortunately, only 2 of those were in town, and so I was able to do my job as expected as your fire chief. But when I responded to mutual aid, we had one in East Spencer, and there was a lot of confusion because Battalion 1 for Salisbury expected that I was there first. I'm gonna take command. That's what I should do. But I knew that my engine had 2 guys, and I had fire blowing out of a house, and I couldn't send them in with 1 person. So again, for all of us in a collective unit to be able to do our job, I had to abandon the command post to go and do that. And the purpose of my family, and it's just to be real, raw, and honest, is at the end of the day, with our staffing model, I choose daily, am I gonna be your fire chief, or am I gonna be a dad and a husband? That's the position that I'm consistently put in. I don't think it's fair, but I'm also an adult, and life's not fair. But to, on a very regular basis, have a 12-year-old that looks at me and says, "Daddy, why are you leaving again? You just got home." It's unfortunate, right? At the end of the day, 10 years from now, the only people that's gonna know I worked extra is my kids, and it's not fair. Deputy Chief, Chief Lewis, we adopted the model that when he was working, he would not function as my deputy chief, he would function as my driver. He would be our engineer for us, and the days that he's there, roughly 19 to 20 hours a week, he drove, and it's helped. The negative to that is it takes away the task that I need and expect him to do as my deputy chief. Obviously, he works full-time for the town of China Grove. As bad as it sounds, due to staffing and shortages, 14 times last year, he called out of his full-time job to be here to cover our town. So obviously, there's not a lack of dedication, but we are consistently putting our employees in positions and making decisions and sacrifices that they shouldn't. Captains, and I'm gonna hit on this, and one of our captains actually wanted the opportunity to come and speak, that way you hear it from him. And maybe get a better understanding of the world that they live in. Last year, out of 730 shifts, they drove 58% of the time. So again, we hired these individuals to perform a job and to perform and do certain functions, but with our staffing model, we're not allowing them to do that. It's hard for us to expect them to grow and be successful in their positions when they're not even able to do their jobs. Out of 38 working fires, 61% of the time they were driving. So again, more than half the time they were not performing their job, and we were putting an inexperienced person in a position to make life or death decisions. You want to talk? Come on. Tall, Reed, same difference.
How are y'all?
Good, how are you?
I'm not as good at public speaking as he is, so bear with me.
We'll give you some practice
Not
time.
me, sorry,
Yeah.
so.
On May 2nd, 2022, I was honored to accept a full-time position as a lieutenant at Spencer Fire Department. I started with the fire service October 2nd, 2007 with Union Volunteer Fire Department as a junior. Worked my way through the ranks as a captain and to a captain position in 2012. I grew up within the North Rowan school area, walked the streets of Spencer with friends after school. While going through the hiring process with Spencer Fire Department, I knew there'd be personal and departmental challenges with transitioning from a part-time to career department, and with me going from a volunteer to a career firefighter. All in all, the transitions have gone smoothly because of the leadership of Chief Lanning, But the biggest hurdle that has been an ongoing issue is personnel. Although we have some great part-time firefighters, there's not enough to fill every opening that we have available. Since my start date, I've worked 2 shifts alone, so I was the only one at the station by myself, which is dangerous and impractical in this profession. You reading this? Okay. The dangerous side is whenever we get a medical call, we don't know whose house we're going to, where we're going, or the reason why they called 911. Almost all the basic medical calls require 2 first responders, and the more severe require 4 or more. For instance, a fall. One person obtains vitals, the other person gets the patient history and the reason why the patient fell, and then it takes 2 people to get the person off the floor and into a chair or appropriately packaged to be transported by EMS. The more severe calls, a cardiac arrest, one person initiates CPR, another person gets the AED ready and applies the AED pads. The third establishes the airway and begins breathing for the patient, and the fourth person is a scribe that marks the times everything happens and stands by to overtake the compressions. On the fire side, each riding position has a specific job on the apparatus. In an ideal world, there are 4 riding positions on a fire truck to make the job go as smoothly and as effectively as possible. The engineer drives and pumps the truck, which they have to be knowledgeable in which line is off the truck, proper pumping pressures for each line. The officer has to give the initial scene size up, perform a 360 of the structure, give reports to the fire chief and incoming crews, and lead the fire attack crew to the structure. One of the backseat firefighters are in charge of catching the fire hydrant and then meeting up with the crew at the door and supply slack of extra hose so they can progress through the structure. The other backseat firefighter is to pull the initial fire attack line and be ready for when the officer gets to them to go interior to fight the fire. With only having 2 personnel on the truck at the moment, almost all these roles fall upon the shoulders of the officers. Chief Landing feels the needed roles within the scene, which takes away from his required roles on the fire ground, not to mention the hundreds of hours he already gives the town for free, all in to attempt to ensure we as his staff have the adequate bodies needed for each call. It is difficult as an officer to perform the roles that would typically take 3 or 4 people on a typical fire scene. As the first arriving engine, the officer has to catch the hydrant, run to catch up with the truck, check the scene and give an initial size up, pull the line to the door, and then perform the 360 of the structure, and then mask up to breach the door to make entry for fire attack. Which that series of events happens when we are actually in the officer's role and have qualified engineer in the seat. In times we do not have an engineer, we as officers had to make sure that our firefighter that is right in the officer's seat knows the pressure and the tasks that have to be performed, all while the officer is getting the engine set up and ready to charge the lines. One thing that makes it slightly easier on us is that Salisbury Stations 1 and 3, Millers Ferry, and East Spencer fire departments are close and are expected to get out the door in the same amount of time that we are. So with the structure fire, our next arriving engine is typically on the scene within 5 to 7 minutes. With that being said, a lot can happen in those 5 to 7 minutes. A family member could be trapped, the fire could be pending upon another structure. That 5 to 7 minutes with a fully staffed engine being first on the scene can make a significant difference. With everyday operations, we as officers have to check the schedule every day and plan out if we're going to be in the officer's seat for 12 hours or if we're going to be operating as the engineer. There's been shifts where I've been the officer and the engineer for my full 48 hours, and there's been shifts to where I've got to be the officer for the whole. Scratch that. There's been shifts where I've been the officer and engineer at the same time for my full 48 hours, and there's been shifts where I got to be just the officer for the 48 hours. But on a typical shift, we're switching back and forth from one side of the truck to the other, which from the outside doesn't sound like much, but we have to move all of our turnout gear, certain tools, equipment, swap radios, get the employee that's going to be working in the officer side of the truck situated, and make sure they know exactly what to do and when to do it. In conclusion, each position has its role within the firehouse, and we as officers had to play every role except for the chief position. It has taken me years to get to where I am as an officer, and with current staffing, I'm expected a new hire who has less than a year in the fire service to understand the responsibilities and the roles that have to be done with riding the officer's seat of the truck. There is no way to effectively train and prepare an inexperienced new hires for the situations and the expectations of riding the officer's seat. As an officer for this organization, there is no other valuable option than adding full-time engineers and firefighters. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Now that they know you're such a good public speaker, you're in trouble.
That's what I say.
There you go, Austin.
This is written out, I can read.
Any questions thus far?
No.
So part-time staffing. Like Captain Waller hit on, we do. We are blessed with a group of amazing part-time individuals. Shy of one or two, they're all career firemen, whether it's the city of Salisbury or city of Kannapolis. And they bring a wealth of knowledge with them. Part of the issue is not even so much of how many we have, because I think we could have 40 and we would still have shortages. The problem lies that we may have a day and 7 of the 14 are on the same shift, which means that all 7 of them cannot work that day. With the exception of us, all the other career departments work a revolving 24 on, 48 off schedule. And so that is part of the issue. So historically, we're 25% vacancy rate, and in the last 3 months, it's been between 30 to 35 consistently. I don't think I ran the numbers for February, but that I think picture spoke for itself. There's a lot of red. But to further drive that point, we had 151,000 and some change budgeted for part-time. And as of the beginning of January, we've only used 35% of that. So there's clearly a need there. We've got funds that were budgeted and it's not being utilized. So volunteers, as of December 31st, we had 7. Again, given state mandates, things that we're required, even your volunteers are required a minimum of 36 hours in a year of training, which is relative to 216 with ISO, that's minimal. You know, if you literally darken the doors 7 or 8 times in a year, you would have your training hours. We removed 3 members going into this year because they didn't have that. I refused to sign a piece of paper saying that they had when they hadn't. Of the remaining 4, they responded to 1.5% of our call volume last year. I'm understanding of the reasons. They have full-time jobs, they have families. Unfortunately, that's just the world that we live in in a volunteer fire service. However, that in itself means that relying on them to be extra bodies is not reliable. So a shared issue, all right? Every small town, couple rural departments, they've all experienced this. Fortunately for them, they kind of maybe had a vision from their fire departments a little earlier than we have. So in 2014, China Grove went to 2 full-timers a shift. In 2023, they added the 3rd, which functions as their fireman. Landis did the same thing in 2013, and in 2023, added the 3rd fireman. Granite Quarry has had 1 full-time captain since 2009. In 23, they added full-time engineers with the plan to add their 3rd individual as their fireman in 2024. Currently, they have a part-timer that hopefully covers that 24-hour vacancy for firefighters. And then Locke, which is a strictly rural non-municipal department, for at least 10 years, they've been fully staffed with full-time individuals. And I would say out of anyone in the county, they have probably the best volunteer base, and they still struggle. And the reason of putting that in there is not to compare us to them, but to say this is not just a Spencer problem. It's experienced in every volunteer department, every municipal department in the county and in the state. Salisbury has the same issues, Kannapolis, Concord, so on and so forth. So, as your fire chief, looking at everything, feeling that we have explored every option, shy of coming to you and asking for more positions, we feel that the only solution, myself and Mr. Franzese, is that we've turned every rock. This is just where we're at. We have to have more full-time staff. If we want to give the citizens and the business owners the level of service from a fire department that they expect and that they should expect and deserve, that's kind of where we're at. I think Heather has the financial numbers of that. But obviously, that would look as if we hired 3 engineers to work the same schedule, and then 3 firemen to go with that. Obviously, it allows me the flexibility to be in your fire chief 100% of the time versus depends on the day and the time of the day. With that, is the request to keep some part-time. So there's a caveat there, is that if we drop below 15 members on the roster, we're on probation with the state. We can risk losing our ISO Class 2 rating. Being a single fire station department, 15 is that magic number, and then the more stations, obviously, then that threshold will rise. By doing that, it would allow us to eventually cross-train our full-timers. If a captain's off, the engineer rides up, the fireman rides up, and our part-time could fill that role of fireman. It gives them that flexibility that if it's a brand-new part-timer, they can function in the role of firefighter. On the flip side of that is that it would cover 864 hours of guaranteed vacancies of our full-timers with their Kelly Day. And what a Kelly Day is the way that the days fall in the number of days in a month on a 28-day cycle. If you work over 10 days, it is your Kelly Day. So every third month, every one of our full-timers has a Kelly Day. So shy of paying another full-timer 24 hours of overtime, we could fund that with part-time, allow them to still work, still be a part of our organization and our town, but at a much lower rate. That is all that I have. Any questions for me?
Any questions at this point for Chief Lanning? And then we're going to hear the financial impact here in
All
a
right,
few
let me ask
minutes.
you a question.
Yes, sir.
Out of your current staff right now, if you're looking for 3 full-time people, do you have 3 full-time people that, I mean, do you have 3 people that would take on this full-time
I
responsibility?
feel very confident in saying that out of 3 engineer positions, I could hire 2 tomorrow. Now, obviously, that's hypothetical, right? They have to work a notice and a hiring process and all of that. And for firemen, I would feel pretty confident we have at least 1, if not 2, for that as well.
Okay.
That will help out tremendously.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
As far as the volunteers are concerned, are any of those individuals interested or available for full-time?
No, ma'am. No, one of the volunteers is getting fastly approaching his retirement with the city of Salisbury. One is approaching retirement in the private sector. One is a full-time cop for the town, and the other is young, but he's an uncertified individual who's full-time with Cabarrus County Sheriff's Department.
So due to the 2023 year when the 36-hour minimal training requirement wasn't met by the volunteers,
Yes, sir.
if they were able to meet that, would they be interested, or is
No.
that just because of
No,
the fact
I don't
that-
feel, and Chief Lewis, I think would agree, I don't feel that any of our volunteers would have been the slightest interested in a full-time
Understood.
position.
Okay. Thought I would ask.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Peter?
Well, excuse me, I certainly would, just to maybe put an exclamation point on it. You know, this is an issue, of course, that we've been talking about together
Yes.
for some period of time. We've, as Chief mentioned, we've turned over all sorts of rocks, gone up different trees, and, you know, this is a recommendation that's brought before y'all with a lot of consideration, but with, you know, an understanding of how serious of a position we're in. We certainly value all the efforts that our team has put in this. It's really a painful transition to go from a model that functioned great for most of our town's history to, you know, and it doesn't happen overnight. I guess it's like, what, boiling the frog? That, you know, all of a sudden you've reached a point where you've got to do something differently, and appreciate the opportunity to work with Chief Lanning and his team to look at this issue and have a solution. And you'll hear more from Heather in just a moment about what that looks like. But the the end of this presentation is going to be that we have identified a solution for how we make this change for this fiscal year, but there are implications for the future and what that means. And so that's really I guess the hard part of the conversation is that looking to the future, we have to understand what it means for our budget, for our tax rate, et cetera. But as your manager, I'm here to share my perspective and my recommendation that this is the investment that the town deserves, and it's a priority. I think we all have talked about this. I think that's the understanding, but that's why we're bringing this, is because it is a priority that needs to be addressed. Yeah.
So I've got one question that probably not going to be able to be answered tonight, definitely not right now until after we hear the financial impact, but I guess trying to keep in mind the staffing situation alongside the need for additional living quarters. And does this staffing arrangement, how does that impact the need? Obviously, the need's still there, but does it impact it one way or the other?
So, yes. It is feasible. Obviously, it is very close quarters now. With the addition of more staff on a daily basis, that's only going to become more of an issue. However, currently the 2 temporary bedrooms, we have 4 beds total. 5 including the bed that is currently in the captain's office. So in terms of space, it's going to be extremely tight. Staff knows that, but I believe that it is also extremely feasible.
Okay, and I did have another question. This letter you have from the Office of the State Fire Marshal, I'm making an assumption here, and that may be very dangerous, but I know that in the past, these funds were available just to volunteer fire departments. It says that there's been a change in the law. Has that change affected your ability to apply for that money?
So the only change that directly applies to us was the increase from a max of 6 full-timers to 8. Like I said, even then, crunching numbers, we may be deemed ineligible. But the point and the goal is to hope to receive the blessing to at least attempt. In worst case, we say we tried and we don't receive it.
Right. Yeah, I talked to Carl Ford last year and talked to him about our situation and needing additional firefighters.
Yes, ma'am.
And, he said that there was money for volunteer departments, but he didn't know about paid city or municipal departments. So I'm hoping that a change would affect in a
Absolutely.
positive manner for us.
Most definitely, yes, ma'am. Yeah, unfortunately, there are multiple avenues for funding, but oftentimes it is pretty strict that it's for volunteer organizations only.
And I think I've mentioned this before to the board, we've not been successful in the SAFER grant application that would have helped fund these positions
Right.
for the past 2 years. But we have talked and are continuing to talk, and I'll be in DC in April, I believe. And that's one of the things I'm going to really push with our federal legislators, because that is a federal program.
Right.
And I don't think many of them realize what that program has become.
Sure.
And I think they see a need for some potential reform there. So if they could do that to where it opens it up to more organizations like ours, I think that would be helpful. Not to say that it's going to happen, but
Sure, absolutely.
we've got to push where we can.
Yeah, and I know the county has, the departments there have fire taxes, but we can't levy a tax specifically for,
Because it's
can we?
already part of our
Because
taxes.
it's in our
right?
tax budget.
So
Okay.
yes, you can levy a tax, but it's part of your
Overall.
overall
okay.
tax base.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
All right, let's hear the damage.
All right, so first things first, the ordinances that that were in your package,
You can be up to that.
let's go ahead and get those, or at least the SAFER grant. ordinance 2314-011. That's basically where we're taking the SAFER grant, where we had included it in the budget. We're basically taking it back out of the budget. And you'll see though, because we didn't receive the funding, so we want our budget to reflect the true numbers. So that's what that is. And the accounts that are listed there, the ones that are affected, they range from salaries, bonus, the insurance, which is in the FICA, retirement group insurance, 401K, workers' comp, uniforms and supply safety, and the numbers that coincide with that. Just for your information, I printed out the fire budget so that you could kind of see where we stand once we take those numbers out. I'm going to bring those to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, thanks.
So I basically just wanted you to see on the far right-hand side of the paper where the column that says lists the SAFER amounts, and then you would have the adjusted variance. So do you understand what I presented to you? That just gives you kind of gives you a better picture of what the fire's budget is going to, what it will look like once we remove those amounts. Do you guys have any questions about that or comments?
Board, any questions on the financial aspect for this current fiscal year? I think the moral of the story is there's a path to be able to do that this fiscal year. But you will see in there that there is a anticipated pretty significant impact to next year's budget and tax rate.
So, well, and then the next ordinance that you have in there, 2314-012, is basically, that's where we would take fund balance appropriation, and that's where we are talking about putting the monies back into, to fund the new positions for the remaining part of FY '24. And I broke that down as well, but I want to make sure that you understand that you're looking at the budget and how removing the SAFER amounts affects the budget.
Yep.
And then I have another handout, but I want to make sure that we're talking about the right things.
Okay. So the first item, Board, of course, is we're pulling the SAFER grant out. We were not successful, so that anticipated revenue stream comes out.
Right.
And this is the ordinance 23-14.001. And then to account for that, then, we are then amending the expenditure budget to meet that 422,188 shortfall, not having received the federal grant.
Right.
And those expenses were the ones particularly tied to what we would have used the grant money for, of
Right.
course.
Right. Okay. Do you want us to go ahead and consider that, and then we can discuss the other? I mean, it's a
I
matter
think-
of cleaning up the books, basically.
Right.
It's
That's-
it's your pleasure. You can, or we can kind of wait to the
All right,
end.
let's do that if the board's okay with that. So, any questions on that particular ordinance? And if not, is there a motion to adopt ordinance 23-14.011?
The motion is to adopt.
The ordinance that's basically taking out the SAFER
Oh,
grant revenue And then also taking out the portion of the expenditures that would have been associated with that, since we have not actually hired those positions. It's basically cleaning up the anticipated budget for revenue and expenses with what the SAFER grant would have done.
All right, so I move to approve amending the Town of Spencer, North Carolina fiscal year 24-25, removing the SAFER grant-related revenue and expenditures in ordinance 2314-011.
All right, there's a motion by Ms. Sledge. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mohammed. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor? All right, all opposed? That ordinance is approved unanimously. All right, we can move on to the next one.
Perfect, thank you for that.
Yep.
Okay, so the next ordinance that you see
Bless you.
is ordinance 23-14.012. And what this ordinance is, since we were not awarded the SAFER grant, the town desires to phase in 3 new engineers in April and 3 firefighters mid-June without grant support to meet the required staff standards. That's what it says in the ordinance. So what this does is takes fund balance appropriation, we'll take $26,483 of that. And what that's, we increase the revenue there, and the expenditures are the lines listed there, and that will fund the 3 engineers and 2, the engineers and firefighters for the rest of the year. With that
Phasing them in, so that the
Thank you.
the suggestion is to phase it in with the engineers starting in April, and then the firefighters starting mid-June. And part of the reason for that, and not necessarily just waiting for next fiscal year, for example, for part of that, is one, so we could, if we know this is going to be the commitment for the future and looking towards next fiscal year, we can go ahead and get started on our recruitment process.
That's right.
And,
Me too.
and not, for example, wait till July and then start, and before you know it, it's December before we have people on a truck. So that's the reason for that, and, trying to phase it in that method.
And one thing I need you to notice is, on the agenda item, the financial impact there, there is a note that says, also projected that next year's tax rate would have to increase at least 7.5 cents to cover the cost of these 6 new positions. Okay?
Yeah.
So I wanted you to see a breakdown of that 7.5 cents and what that would cover. And the only thing that I took into consideration whenever I created this handout was the bare minimum salary and benefits. For example, your insurance, retirement, and your 401K, and the things that the town provides, and the Social Security, and FICA and that. So I'm gonna hand this out to you, and I'll kind of explain that whenever you get that.
I could help you pass it around.
Let me ask a question. As far as the phasing
Pass it
in,
around.
if we had individuals who came forward and were ready to go to work, could we put, could we accept the additional firefighters earlier than June if we were able to find them, or they came forward? Or are we set on hiring the engineers first and then the firefighters, or?
And Chief Lanning may want to speak to this, but I think the order of progressing through is, it would be most useful immediately to get that engineer seat secured with full-time staff, and so that's, I believe, why that one comes first. But
Yeah, so, and we had, I think, had brief discussion of that. Even internal candidates, like I said, I think shy of a 2-week notice, they would start the next day. But I think due diligence in the process, that regardless to internal or external, is to hold everyone to the same standard, to put everyone through the same testing, to ensure that we are receiving the best 3 candidates that we feasibly can. I think it's the fair way to do it. And with that is running 2 processes at once would be extremely cumbersome. It would be a lot. So I think there's parts of the processes we could kind of do together, The agility test, for example, is going to be the same no matter what position you're in. So, there's several different thought processes there. But in the scheme of the command structure, doing the engineers first does make more sense. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what you have in front of you is, I broke down each position, and I did the minimum, the target, and maximum hourly wage. And that is your salary for the year, worked in overtime. And then I worked in there, Social Security, retirement, 401K, insurance for one single individual that the town would have to pay, and the workers' comp. And if you'll see that the firefighter total at minimum would be $62,000 a year is what the town would be responsible for one firefighter. Off to the right is where it's the same column where it'd be minimum, target, and max. So the minimum for 3 is $186,301. And then engineer is the same equations, it's just engineer and their pay. And same thing for captain. On the flip side, I just broke down the insurance out and how that number come about. And then for the full year cost of 3 firefighters and 3 engineers is $80,698. And that's at minimum pay. That's not with any increases across the board, that's basic minimum pay. And then a reduction in part-time costs of $111,255. So that means that our total additional cost for these people would be $269,000. And then the tax rate would be 7.42 cents that we would have to increase the tax to cover that cost. And, go ahead.
How do the wages stack up against neighboring communities?
Interesting question. Very interesting question.
That's your
Yes.
question, your answer.
Very interesting.
So we had a conversation about that this afternoon. It's hard to compare. We use China Grove as an example. Population, they're larger than the town. In terms of their staffing of their department, very similar. They're ahead. We would be one of, I think it's safe to say, one of the lowest paid in terms of salary in the county for a municipal department.
About the highest call volume
Highest
besides
call volume.
Salisbury.
And me and Peter talked, Concord, obviously all of our staff seen it. They just bumped their starting firefighter pay to $51,000, which is incredible. Great for them. Obviously, we can't compare with that. I know that. And I think we were gonna have a little bit further discussion maybe going in for next year's budget. But they're definitely, that needs to be looked at to make sure that we are competitive. What I don't want is for us to be getting bottom of the barrel employees and just get what's left.
You just have to tell people how much better it is to live in Spencer.
Well, that's part of it, and the other part of it is our benefits package is very strong here.
Right.
And I think you heard a comparison that somebody coming here from another organization, they might save $8,000 in their insurance costs over a year, given their situation as an example. So we do offer a lot as an organization, and, it's a total package. It's a work environment situation. It's all sorts of things that make us an appealing place to be. Certainly, we want to strive to be competitive, but we are smaller compared to all those around us that are, using this model.
I know, speaking as for maturity, as you get a little bit older, that's the most important thing. It's great that you make a whole lot per year, but you got to think about your insurance and all the retirement.
Right.
That is what, when you hit 50 years old, if you hadn't got that, it's too late. I hate to say it. So it's really important. And I'm trying to talk to all these guys out here and stress that. It is.
Well, and I think the unfortunate part is historically as a fireman, it takes you 8 to 10 years to figure that out.
Yeah.
Right, and it does. But you're not taught in school. You're not taught when you're hired at an organization, hey, this is what's important. This is what's gonna keep you going after you retire.
That's exactly right.
But it's crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah, I work here to feed my dog.
Well, I know since I've been on board, and even prior to that, the fire department has been an issue. And I'm well aware of other issues in other parts of the county with the fire department, especially in Salisbury. I know they've got a lot of stuff going on now. We've just got to fix it. I mean, safety is our number one duty,
Priority.
providing safety to our town. And they won't like a tax increase, but
No, they're not gonna like it after they went up this past year.
no, but that, I mean.
But we gotta stress as an educational program to them to understand
That's
that we
right.
are trying to protect them, just like you, that's your
Absolutely.
job. And like I said, we as a board, I think we all appreciate everything y'all do.
Yes,
Wholeheartedly.
and most people in this town have been impacted by both the fire and the police department in one way or the other. And then many of them have had to visit their homes in an emergency, including my own. So, I don't think we have a choice.
We don't have a choice.
We don't.
And, it
We
should
don't.
have, I just hate that it hasn't already been done,
Yeah.
but we can fix it. It's gonna cost, but we can fix it.
I appreciate everything Mr. Lanny's doing for us.
Yes, absolutely.
I was gonna
And
say,
his team.
Appreciate all of it.
we have to do it, but the other thing is, we've got way too much good stuff going with the fire department right now.
We sure do.
So
Yes.
let's step up and continue that.
I agree 110%.
You know, I think all of us here acknowledge the need for it. We wouldn't be here talking about it if we didn't, and we know it's a problem. I think the most important thing, though, that going forward, if this is approved, is how we communicate this to the public.
Public.
There has got to be a lot of outreach to explain. And, you know, the explanation is easy, I think, but there's got to be that effort to do that.
I agree.
Because, you know, we can assign a direct cost for what our citizens have to get to have reliable fire service, to have a career department. And that's what we've got to have. We've just got to be able to communicate that message. And it's y'all communicating the message, it's town staff communicating the message, and it's us as a board being able to communicate that message as well.
You just
You know,
can't,
it's one of those, it's like, do you want the first responders there when you need them? Or do you not?
Yeah.
And Mayor, if I may provide a little context just about the dollars and cents of it, when we talk about 7.5 cents. You know, our median house
I was gonna ask
value
that,
in
yeah.
town is roughly, or at least through, when we were, this time last year, I believe it was about $185,000. So 7.5 cents more taxes on that value comes out to, well, it comes out to about $140. And you divide that by 12, and you're looking at $11 to $12 a month.
Doable.
And
that-
that's what people need. to
Doable.
do.
And so when you're
Right.
thinking about the insurance, the assurance you're providing for that 11, collectively, everyone contributing that much more per month, essentially, what you're getting in return, it starts to feel like a much better value than something like Netflix that probably costs more, you know?
Right.
So just to start to compare it in those
Apples and
terms.
oranges.
Well, and so the other thing I think that needs to be communicated, and I think this needs to be put in perspective for the entire county, the number of calls we are running, right? I mean, that's part of what's necessitating it. And, you know, what I would love to know is, what is our average cost per call, right, as a department? And then how does that compare to the rest of the county?
Yep.
My guess is it's pretty darn efficient.
So, and the one thing that I didn't even allude to during my presentation is our call volume. I'm gonna say is gonna be at a minimum 300 to 400 calls more this year. And the reason for that is we had a meeting last week. It was the Fire and Rescue Association meeting. The topic came up is routine calls in town, okay? So if John Doe falls in his bathroom at 3 a.m, but he says he's not hurt, but he can't get himself up. Previously, that did not pull the fire department. It was EMS only. And what that may mean is that that's EMS coming from Cleveland. And what I'm not okay with is that. I'm not okay with injured or not, our citizens deserve a certain level of service. And I feel that, and myself and our other officers, we talked, we were in agreement that we'll start running all routine calls with EMS. If we need them, we can upgrade them. The problem with that is we've had numerous calls that comes in routine, and you get there and the guy's laying there with his head busted open.
Yeah.
Right? It's all in how, me as the caller, what I tell the telecommunicator, whether it's an emergent call or a routine call. So although I know that's going to be more undertaking for us, I feel like, again, that's just the service that we should provide our citizens. So I would expect a pretty decent increase again, but.
Well, and that, you bring up an interesting point, right? Because EMS is funded through the county.
Yes.
Right? And so that would be saying, well, maybe the county should be stepping up and covering that, or having to help cover the addition of staff, paid staff. The reality is, if they do that, they're gonna increase their tax rate to
Right.
offset that as well.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I think at the end of the
Either
day,
way, it's gonna
our
be an
citizens,
increase.
we're gonna have to pay for it,
Yeah.
one way or the other. And I
Well-
would much rather know that you're coming to get me than an ambulance from Cleveland.
Right.
Right, and when you think you have 3 schools within town limits, all these visitors to the museum, 73,000 last year.
Yes.
I mean, we've got to have people that can get there immediately, and y'all do a wonderful job of that.
Yes.
It's
Well, I know
important, and
we've-
we've got a lot of elderly people like me that might fall, and I have already fallen.
Well, and I know in through doing our SAFER grant,
Well,
in through doing our SAFER grant is, and that was the big thing, was risk analysis for our town, is that our population may be low, but when Polar Express brings 75,000 people to this town, it's almost like a seasonal increase,
Yeah.
right? It's not, maybe they don't spend the night, but it is an increase nonetheless. And, on a good day, we're 10, 15,000 people in the town throughout the day, so the risk is there. The question is ultimately do we want to be prepared for it, or do we want to be unprepared?
Well, and if you look at other events that go on at the Transportation Museum, I mean, there's something going on there all the time.
Absolutely.
Virtually all the
Yes.
time, yeah. So,
Just about every week.
Yes.
They do a good job over there getting people here, so we need to be able to provide safety for them.
yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I think, like we said, I think we need to educate the public. I think we need to do it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Don't wait till the
Yeah.
last minute and say, hey, we're jumping your prompt taxes
Yeah.
up 7.5 cents. So I would appreciate Mr. Fenzies and the staff possibly to work up a program so that we can educate the people some way, or with the fire department's assistance as far as
Absolutely.
that goes.
Yes,
I
sir.
don't know how to do it, but we need to do it.
Fast.
Well, I think there's some promotional material, whether it's mailers or things like that, one pager that explains what we're doing, that we're transitioning our model of firefighting, staffing, and how we're taking care of that this fiscal year, but that we anticipate there's gonna be an impact next year, and there's no way around that, to be able to provide compliant fire, I mean, that's the matter of it.
It
You
is.
know, hey, the compliancy is the minimum thing. I think it's the other stuff that we've heard, that work-life balance, that one hits home to me. I mean, I get it, right? We all, many of us have families, or at least significant others, and work competes for that time. And you shouldn't have to pick between the two.
No.
No,
no,
and
not at
you
all.
shouldn't have 800 hours of non-compensated time.
Not compensated at all.
I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And we appreciate it,
Obviously,
Chief Planet,
or you
but,
wouldn't,
you know,
you wouldn't be here.
the
if
thing
you
about
didn't.
it, I concur, Mr. Mayor, and Steve, in reference to what you're saying, because also too, in the mailers that we send out to the community, that can be put in that
Yeah.
as well, and they need to understand how the number of calls have substantiated over the years as well, and this needs to be done in an expeditious mannerism, because the level of care and service that you all are providing with the manpower that you have, not wanting to burn out the men that you have and lose the quality that we have and be in a worse situation than we are at this moment, because we've been dealing with this gamut for some time.
Yeah.
And in order for us to improve and be able to provide the quality of service, we need to do this.
Yes, sir.
There's no other way.
That's right.
I agree.
Yep.
You know, I mean, I think you look at it, we're talking about two things, right? Our citizens' pocketbook versus our citizens' well-being and lives.
Absolutely.
And the well-being and lives of our fire department.
Absolutely.
Understaffed when you don't
That's
have
what I'm
enough
saying. That's what I'm saying,
positions.
because the number of men that are sitting here right now could decrease. I mean, we don't want to burn them out. And we don't burn our chief out neither.
No.
Not at all. We thank you all.
Absolutely.
we
I tell
certainly
you
do.
personally.
Yep.
Okay, so are we ready for a motion?
You're ready for a motion anytime you are.
I move to approve the budget for the ordinance of 23-14-0.012, amending the town of Spencer, North Carolina fiscal year 23-24 budget for the funding of 6 full-time employees.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Muhammad, second by Ms. Sledge. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
I'll raise my hand real high.
You understand?
Ready, both of them.
All right.
Which Sam was here?
You only get
All,
one vote.
all opposed? That's approved unanimously. I want to say thank y'all for coming. It means a lot to support your chief, to support each other, and just know that we support you too. Hopefully this proves that. But I would put our emergency services up against anybody else in this county, so thank you for what you do. We want to make sure that we give you what you need and that our citizens have the service they deserve. So thank y'all. Thank you for all you do. Chief, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
And thanks for bringing issues before us, right? It's our job to work together to fix it. And Peter, thank you for spending the time and working through solutions, you and Heather both, on the funding piece of it, recognizing it was an issue and working to fix it. Now we get to take the heat and
It's a good thing we just got elected.
we'll be prepared for it.
Yeah, the election, if the election was next week, we might all be in trouble.
I wouldn't say that.
Right, we had all.
Yeah, I think, Board, you know, and we do need to understand the impact financially this is gonna have next budget year on our citizens, and I think we need to make sure that we're
Very clear.
communicating very, very clearly the need for it, and, you know, that there really is no other alternative.
No.
This has to happen. And it's a painful bite at it, but much needed. And the reality is, as we continue to develop and that tax base increases, that impact goes down. But it's something we've got to do now.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it as 2 Coca Java cups a month
Yeah.
per household.
That just hit really deep for me.
Do what?
That just hit really deep. I think I might pay their bills every month.
If folks come to Coffee with the Chiefs, we can make up at least one of those
Yeah,
cups
there
a
you
month,
go.
right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Mayor, Board, thank you. We
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank
your
you.
support.
Very much.
Thanks
Thank
to
you.
all of you.
Thanks.
All right, Board. We have reached the end of our agenda this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A motion by Ms. Moody. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Miller. All in favor? All right, all opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you all.